attending public schools with and without school feeding program in Enugu State, Southeast Nigeria. Dr. Nebe, thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. Okay, so my topic is a comparison of nutritional status of pupils attending public primary schools with and those who are attending in schools without school feeding program. And these are my authors and their affiliations. Please, can you go to the next slide? So it will be discussed under these outlines. Next slide. Okay, so school children have increased need for nutrients, as we all know, and some of the reasons are there: the higher brain glucose metabolism than adults, longer overnight fast, thereby due to higher sleep demand, as well as long walk to schools for children from low socioeconomic status who live in the rural areas. So UNICEF has also noted that hunger and malnutrition can limit learning, including children's attention span, and mental capacities. School feeding program was introduced in Nigeria in 2005. That was when it was launched. But then the implementation did not start until the year 2016 during the Muhammad Buhari administration. So then it was reactivated and the implementation started. And they had aim, which was to provide one extra meal to school children in the public primary schools in order to improve their nutritional status, thereby attracting them to school and removing them from being absent from school. The next slide. So the aim of the study is to assess and compare the nutritional status of public primary school children benefiting from the state school feeding program and those who are not benefiting from these programs. Next slide. So the study was a comparative cross-sectional study in which the nutritional status of 250 pupils in public primary schools who were benefiting from school feeding program were compared with 250 pupils from non-benefiting schools in Enugu. And the study was done among primary 2 and 3 because as at that time, only primary 2 and 3 pupils were benefiting from this program. And the study was done in 2020. The multi-stage sampling technique was applied, and that was collected using pre-tested self-administered questionnaires for personal information from the parents of the pupils, and then performers were used to write down the measurements, while a wealth index calculator was used for socioeconomic status of the pupils. Data was analyzed with IBM statistical package for social sciences version 25. Descriptive statistics was performed and presented as mean, standard deviation, and frequencies and proportions. Pearson's chi-square test was used to cross-tabulate to test for association at p-value of 0.05, less than 0.05 and 95% confidence interval. Multivariate logistic regression analysis was used to predict determinants. Next slide. So the results, we got comparable, similar, and then comparable values in the socio-demographic variables like age. You can see that the age of the two groups are similar, and therefore they are comparable. Also, other socio-demographic variables like occupation of parents, income, and all that, they were quite comparable because of the appropriate way of the sampling which we did. Prevalence of stunting was significantly higher among the respondents from the non-benefiting schools. So nutritional status, according to weight for age, was more, among height for age, was better among the benefiting school compared to the non-benefiting school. So, but prevalence of underweight and wasting, even though they were also higher among the non-benefiting school, which still shows better nutritional status, they were not statistically significant. School feeding, fathers' occupation and mothers' occupation were associated with nutritional status, but they were not statistically, okay, they were associated with them, yeah. So the predictor, when we did the logistic regression, there was no predictor for this particular dependent variable at 95% confidence interval. Next. So these are my tables. These are the first ones, demographic characteristics. You can see the similar and then comparable age. You can see the gender male-female ratio. Most of them were comparable. The urban and rural categories differ because of our sampling method. We had selected 8 schools from the rural and 4 schools from the urban, even though the number of feeding schools and the non-feeding schools were equal. We had 6 schools from the feeding and 6 schools from the non-feeding. However, because we divided each into urban and rural, we selected 2 urban feeding schools and 4 urban non-feeding schools. The same thing happened in the non-benefiting schools. So these are, like I said, the socio-demographic characteristics were similar across the board. Please, next slide. Then compare the nutritional status of the respondents and the benefiting and non-benefiting. So height for age, which measures stunting, you can see that prevalence of stunting among the non-benefiting school children was 7.1, which is quite high, compared to 3.4% in the benefiting school children. And this was statistically significant. Weight for age, the same thing, it's also higher. The prevalence was higher in the non-benefiting compared to the non-benefiting schools, but not statistically significant. Just in wasting that we had similar value, even though 16 against 15, 4.6 against 4.3. But for height for age and weight for age, we had higher prevalence of stunting and wasting among the non-benefiting compared to benefiting, which means that nutritional status were more, as measured by stunting and wasting, were better among the feeding compared to the non-feeding. Next. So when we assess the degree of the nutritional status to know if we have severely malnourished children, we were able to obtain using the body mass index for age, that only one child, severely underweight. We had 5 people, 5 pupils, that's 1.4% of the children in the non-benefiting being severely underweight. The same thing happened in the height for age. So we had 5 being severely stunted and 5 being severely wasted, as compared to what we have had in the benefiting school. So we also had just 1 person overweight and nobody was obese. Next slide. So the predictors were there were no predictors in all of them, both stunting, wasting, and underweight. Next slide. Next slide. No predictors here. Next slide. Okay, no predictors, please, next. So in the discussion, like I said, so demographic characteristics were comparable, but the key finding is the higher prevalence of stunting in the non-benefiting pupils compared to the benefiting pupils. And this finding was also, it tallies with what was obtained in Ghana, Abazo, Faith, and others carried out a study that's quite similar to this, and we got almost the same thing with what they got. In Enugu, there hasn't been any study on comparing nutritional status of feeding and non-feeding schools, but there was one done by Eze et al. About nutritional status, and they also got similar things with what we got. Next slide. So school feeding program supplements the intake which a child receives from the family. So, and we excluded children who were very sick, which can impair the finding of stunting. So we can attribute our finding that there is better nutritional status among the feeding school compared to the non-feeding to the school meal that they receive. It's also not disputable that in Nigeria, most primary schools are attended by children who are from low socioeconomic status. So the evidence is evident by the higher proportion of children from low socioeconomic status, which we observed in our study. Though no study had compared nutritional status of benefiting and non-benefiting in any way, some other people who have studied just nutritional status have also gotten this similar prevalence of stunting among the pupils. Next slide. So the study has shown that nutritional status, weight for age, which measures stunted, was better among the respondents with 7.1 prevalence in the benefiting compared to the non-benefiting with 3.4% prevalence. Since this study has indicated that feeding program has tendency to improve the health status of pupils, the government is encouraged to ensure sustenance of the feeding program in the state, extend feeding program beyond primary 2 and 3 to cut across all the children in primary school and, if possible, children in the nursery schools. And researchers are also encouraged to dig into this field to be able to assess the nutrients and nutrients in the school meal, as well as the implementation. Thank you very much.